Our next guests on the program today are the President of the Indian Staffing Federation, Lohit Bhatia, and Executive Director of the Indian Staffing Federation, Suchita Dutta. With an aim to facilitate opportunities for India's staffing industry, they are working closely with India's legislative bodies and policy makers to restore and resolve the nation's employment, labour and staffing issues. Listen in.
With an aim to facilitate opportunities for India's staffing industry,
we focus and we talk about the tripartite work environment between a job seeker, a principal employer or a customer, and the staffing company in itself.
They represent ISF on all key platforms.
Whole idea is that how is it that the corporates who are using the third party and the staffing partners can actually engage together as two partners and work together?
NewsX India A-List proudly recognizes Lohit Bhatia and Suchita Dutta for excellence in business entrepreneurship.
Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX India A-List. My name is Gauri Kundalia, and joining us now are two very special guests. We have with us Mr. Lohit Bhatia, who's the President of Indian Staffing Federation, and we also have with us Ms. Suchita Dutta. She is the Executive Director of Indian Staffing Federation. Welcome to the show. Jumping straight to the questions. To you first, explain a little bit about the role, the focus, the agenda of ISF as an apex body, especially as a body which represents the staffing companies in India.
You know, Indian Staffing Federation and ISF primarily, Gauri, to be very honest, talks about formalization in Indian employment. Mm-hmm. And within formalization, we focus and we talk about the tripartite work environment between a job seeker, a principal employer or a customer, and the staffing company in itself. The tricona of the three is what we call as the tripartite relationship in flexi staffing industry. An Indian Staffing Federation with nearly 100 members representing close to 1.03 million workforce every day, primarily work for the betterment of the staffing formalized environment in India per se. The growth of the industry itself and championing the cause of bringing about formalization using the right tools of sustainability, social fabric inclusion, as well as financial inclusion and compliances in a very, very compliant and a statutory manner as far as the laws of the land is concerned. So that's what Indian Staffing Federation talks about and speaks about. It's also a happy note for us because we've just completed our 10th anniversary celebration. So Indian Staffing Federation is now a decade old, and this is our 11th year. And staffing in India itself is growing leaps and bounds. So our recent report also speaks about that.
All right. Speaking and taking from what you've just told us, the tripartite staffing arrangements, Ms. Datta, how does the tripartite staffing arrangement protect the job seeker and corporates, and also seeks to improve, let's say, ease of doing business while providing social protection as well as employment opportunities?
Thank you, Gauri, first of all, for this opportunity to have this conversation with you, having Lohit with us. Staffing as an industry has been a perennial need and it has come into existence because of the need that the industry, the corporates felt. Just the way the IT industry was formed, it was various departments and have come into being, and then the IT industry has now become a facilitator. Initially, if you see, the need was more just-in-time requirement, just-in-time hiring, just to give the minimum amount of people to get the work done and then they move on. I think we've come a long way from that. The last 2 decades that the industry has flourished, the whole idea is that how is it that the corporates who are using the third party and the staffing partners can actually engage together as two partners and work together to not only have a better compliant system, but also to ensure that the government which is laying down the labor laws or any other laws that are having implications on the operations of a company, and where the staffing player can actually handhold them and take them to the next level. Those compliances, those methods of working, those new age skills that need to be given as an opportunity, the just in time has become the last of the demand in the hierarchy. So the corporates now are able to see the staffing as a partner company rather than as a person or a individual organization who are just supporting for just-in-time hiring. I think the maturity that has come from the corporates, the user companies, is much more as a facilitator that they are seeing the staffing company. On the other hand, most of the job seekers still about, I would say about 3 years ago also, the perception is that if I have a temp job, I will possibly not be seen as a person who is capable of having a permanent job. So there was a lot of peer pressure, there was a lot of societal pressure that you must always look for a permanent job. Ideally, there is nothing called permanent anymore. So that's where I think the staffing industry has again been able to provide them at a continual opportunity to a job seeker, so that they don't have to look for a job once their project gets over with any company, be it a retail organization, be it an e-commerce, be it a logistics, be it a manufacturing. It is not them who's worried about their job. It is the staffing companies which is worried to provide them another job. Because once the person has enhanced and got a particular skill, it is in the interest of the staffing partner to ensure that he gets the best opportunities that he should be able to get as per the profile growth he deems to have for himself. So the career opportunities that a job seeker gets as a flexi staff working with a formal staffing company, that has given not only the social protection. So if I were to break it down into 3 parts, one is obviously the blue collar employees. There at that level, you are more worried about whether the minimum wages will be paid or not, whether the social security will be paid or not, whether the required reimbursements are happening on time or not, whether do they have the bank account or not, do they have an employment letter or not. These are the things that are, I would say, are not anymore an option, but these are dignity of labor that anybody wants, that I should have an employment letter, I should have a bank account, I should get my salary into my bank, I should be able to protect myself and my family when a pandemic like situation hit us last year. To get all these things, it is very important that the staffing companies who are playing a very, very large role in everybody's life these days, the job seekers have been able to understand that. And last year's report and the study that we did, it clearly shows the satisfaction rate going up much higher than it was ever before. The third stakeholder being the government. Obviously, government, if you notice, the laws are there, plenty of them, almost close to 60,000 odd laws will be there in the entire country if we take up central as well as state. There are a lot of compliances that are involved. Now, how do they get addressed? It gets addressed because government is also concerned that the user companies, and more of them, I'm sure Lohit will also throw some light on it, because there are so many companies who are running with 1 or 2 or 3 people. And those SME companies do not really have a structure. And that's the largest portion of the GDP that contribution comes from. So how do we as a staffing company ensure that, we are able to give all 3 stakeholders, the government, the corporates, the job seekers, their dues back, and they are able to function profitably and professionally, if I were to put it. I think that's where we have moved and come a long way from where we started.
Right. Dutta, you've given us lots of talking threads, and I'd like to pick on them one by one. Mr. Dutta, let's say in the last decade, do you see sentiments towards the temp staffing as an industry change? A, and B, what can the role of staffing industry be to create, let's say, a formal labor market in the next decade?
See, definitely, this is me or?
Sorry, Mr. Bhatia. I beg your pardon.
Sure. So Gauri, taking off from where Suchita left, first and foremost, you must understand that 3/4 of the people who come to staffing companies today come for their first formal job. So about 75% of the workforce has never worked with a large leading Indian company or a multinational company in India or in the Indian environment. Staffing companies are the true stepping stones to not just give you access to to companies. They give you access to great talent, and at the same time to the talent and to the young job seekers, they provide great organizations to work with and enhance their careers. The second thing what staffing companies along with the principal employers put on the table is the entire bit of training on the job. The amount of training which this youth gets is disproportionately higher than what they have got in their education skills. And I'm not saying education is not important. At the base of the pyramid, education is extremely important. But for what people have to accomplish at these organizations, that's what they learn while working for the customers and the brand. So, briefly, Suchita mentioned that point as well, that a decade ago, it was a taboo as to if you're working with a staffing company or whether you're outsourced, because the conversation in youth used to be, how will I get married? How will I tell someone that, I am working for a company where I am temporary in nature or I am temp employee? Today, what's changed is that the notion of your role being temp, but your job being permanent. So your roles can pretty much change from one organization to another, but you remain consistent with most of these organizations. And just as organizations, all our members have seen this every day on the job, that so many of these temps of ours have today become leaders, on the customer side. And I think that gives the greatest satisfaction and the greatest amount of happiness to the entire temp staffing industry, because we brought about this young, fresh talent to corporates, and corporates were able to work with them, give them the skills, impart them the training, and today they take on the dawns of the senior leadership roles within the companies itself. So I think that's where it has come. What we've also noticed with the pandemic, Gauri, to be very honest, is that every time there's an economic meltdown, the organizations become very tactical as to what has to be core to the organization and what has to be permanent in nature and what can be transactionally outsourced. And strategic functions remain permanent, whereas everything transactional in nature becomes outsourced. And that's again what is fueling the growth for the temporary staffing industry in India. So I think the next decade is definitely going to show us that there is a lot of growth in this market even now.
Definitely. Ms. Dutta, would you like to speak about ISF's key achievements in the last 2 years specifically?
I think one of the largest, I would say, is the labor codes that have come into being. And specifically, this is not only a landmark achievement of the Ministry of Labor and Employment and the PMO and everybody involved in it, but I think them coming to have a recognition that the Contract Labor Act now needs to have another format where they are able to give the national staffing license to a company or a state license to an organization depending on where they want to operate, and the administrative hassles that they have taken off. I think that in itself is a recognition that it's not just the economy which needs such kind of format of employment, but it is government also recognizing that the staffing companies are the ones who can actually propel the employment growth. We have been growing double digits for the best part of the last decade for sure. Even in the pandemic, if you notice our report, it has shown a modest growth, but it is still a growth. In a year where people are not getting formal jobs, I would say that's the area that staffing companies are going to be playing a very, very large role. We have a huge sector, certain sectors which need to have the formalization of employment. And I think that's the next goal that we are working towards. Besides the labor code, if I were to look at, if I look at the corporates have started recognizing the need of having a formal staffing company as a partner. Again, I would say there has been a lot of support from government, because the moment the GST has come into being, and there are so many other factors that are coming, which is strengthening the economy, automatically it is becoming an imperative role that the employment partner is a formal partner. And formal partner means that they are contributing to the taxes, they are ensuring that all the dues, which is with the respective organizations like an EPF or an ESIC, those are paid off. And I would say these two driven by government, but obviously championed, some of them have been championed by us, and we are very grateful to Ministry of Labor and Employment to be very, very supportive of the decisions that they have taken. And not only central, I'm thankful to the states as well.
All right, I hate to interrupt, but that's all the time we have. It was a pleasure having this conversation. It is a very important, significant industry at this point in time specifically. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Bhatia and Ms. Dutta.
Thank you, Gauri. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gauri. Thank you, Lohit.